Hello and welcome to this morning's Career-puccino. So hopefully you've got your coffee all ready to join me in a quick blitz on a subject that I know is really important to postdocs. So my name is Emma. I've worked with in and around universities for over 20 something years. And I love working with early career researchers, especially postdocs. And today's topic is something that really comes up a lot when working with postdocs is how do I avoid that sense of failure when I leave academia. So hopefully in the next 20 minutes or so, I'm going to explore that. It is a very real palpable sense that some people feel. I myself went through it when I decided that actually as a postdoc I didn't want to carry on, and it was a difficult decision. It's not one that we undertake lightly. I think partly because as if we've chosen that academic route, we've spent a long time learning, getting all those degrees, probably getting a PhD, the blood, sweat and tears that goes into that, and then possibly one or two postdocs before we then decide that actually academia is not necessarily for us. And that can be a really, really tough decision, and one that is, as I say, heartfelt. So from my own experience, I can remember slowly coming to that realization that I wasn't happy, and then some enforced reflective period when I broke my leg really then did think, actually, this isn't for me. It's time to move on. Difficult decision for me, but also for the people around me. So let's dive in and explore, shall we? So my first graph is now actually really quite old. This comes from something called the Scientific Century, which was published by the Royal Society here in the UK back in, now I think about 2010. Out of all the graphs in all the world, or all the charts, this one really has staying power, because I think it really does emphasize how tough or how tenacious you have to be to stay in academia. Or we could swap it round and think, if we look at how few people stay in academia, then actually other careers are majority careers, that it is quite unusual to perhaps stay in academia. So we've got early career researchers over here, and the switch to from PhD to early career research to then permanent research staff. Permanent research staff is 3.5%. Okay, and then on their tally about 0.5-ish%, 0.45 on this, make it to professor. Now, this is in the UK, so professor is quite high up. So if you're in other jurisdictions where you can become associate professor, but thinking about when you first become permanent in whichever system you find yourself in, so tenure track or whatever that might be, at this point, that's 3.5% of you who started doing PhDs. So at a PhD, we've got people who, over half at this point went for careers outside science. 17% of people who do PhDs go to non-university R&D. So this is a Royal Society, so they're going to focus on science, but humanities is a slightly different picture. But the majority of postdocs that I come across are in science, just the way the numbers work, really. So 30% so a third of people who do PhDs go on to be early career researchers, so postdocs, for want of a catch-all phrase. And then out of them, a real majority of those people then go into either careers outside science or into R&D. So there still is that mobility as a postdoc, you can still move into things. I think it's interesting that, you know, a huge proportion of those postdoctoral people move into careers outside science. It's absolutely fascinating. And then thinking about, you know, how do we move on to that permanent position? We need to get some form of lectureship. What I would encourage you to do is you could look at this graph and think, you know, I'm never going to make it. And people do make it. Obviously, 3.5% of people get lectureships. So look at the numbers in your particular discipline, in the country where you want to work, and just face that reality. Okay, that's the first thing that you need to think about. So look at the chances of you getting a job. And this isn't to do with perhaps merit or anything else. Just look at how many jobs are advertised, and you will soon realize that actually, you know, we have a huge pyramid or a very flat base to our pyramid of early career researchers, and then a tiny few amount of permanent posts. So to some extent, you are competing against the odds. So, you know, that sense of failure is actually, you're in very good company. And I would try and turn it around and think, actually, that's not a failure. It's quite unusual to pursue that route, which brings me on to my next slide, which is to turn it around and think, actually, academia is the alternative career. The majority of people who embark on a PhD are going to end up somewhere else. They are going to end up in jobs that are manifestly useful to society. They are going to be gainfully employed. So PhD plus people are in demand. Sometimes I hear people say, oh, I'm overqualified. I think that's, again, a little bit of a red herring. I think you need to translate the skills and experiences that you have into the language that employer understands. But you have those skills and experiences. Having a PhD means that you can take a project and run with it. You can work autonomously. You can work, if you're a scientist, usually in a team as well. And those things employers love, but you have to articulate them. It's not just enough to go, look, excuse me, I've got a PhD. It's like, what does that mean? Unpack it for the prospective employer. But I think if you are looking at the job market with the expectation that you are going to find a role outside of the university sector or outside of the academic routes inside the university sector, then it suddenly becomes much more normalised. Okay, and this is the quote from Nigel Eady, who works with researchers at King's College in London, which was at a conference about a month ago that I went to. Academia is the alternative career. That's what you need to hang on to. It is unusual to go down that route. Therefore, a sense of failure highlighting an unusual route is it doesn't start to make sense. So I think if you bathe yourself in the statistics, it might be a little bit of a cold shower to start with, but you will see that actually academia is the alternative career. The majority of people go on to careers outside academia. And you know what? The majority of people that I work with who are timid about moving out, unsure about moving out, quite often, a year or so later, I might get a message on LinkedIn going, you know what? That was the best move I made. I'm so happy now. So to think of it as academia is the alternative career. It is a reframing job, but it is also based in facts. Okay, that graph, even though it's quite old, is still holds true. The majority of you will not go into academia. Therefore, it is unusual to be an academic. Some other thoughts around this are thinking about that sense of failure. In academia, we come across these hurdles all the time, and other spheres of work do too. But I think in academia, we are set back. We apply for fellowships, we might not get them. We put in papers. They might take an age to get through the review process to get published. We might put it in for a travel grant. We don't get that. We want to speak at a conference. We don't get that call. That CV of failure is something that if you want to stay in academia, you need to get used to. So if you have that sense of failure that you're not going to make it in an academic career, then actually another way of thinking about it is that academia is pretty much about embracing failure, because you are going to have more grants turned down than are accepted in general. So all the senior academics who come and talk on my courses all highlight that it is a rocky road being an academic. You know, you get on your CV the positive things that you've achieved, but no one ever sees the iceberg underneath the surface that is all those rejections. And so from the startup world, there's a phrase which comes, you know, is, what is it? Fail fast and fail small, fail fast. Basically, get it over and done with. So if you are thinking, oh, you know, kind of, I need to move out of academia, it's not for me, but you've got that sense of failure associated with it, it might be easier to embrace that bit now than perhaps go down the academic route and have that continuous sense of, you know, treadmill that, you know, I have to write one grant and then I have to write another grant, and some are not going to get accepted and things. That absolutely works for some people. And, you know, people are successful academics. But I think that, you know, kind of that your sense of failure at perhaps not taking that academic route could be turned around into a sense of liberation and hey, I'm not going to have to be in that hamster wheel mentality. And increasingly, I'm seeing postdocs look at their research and go, I love the science, I love doing this, I love doing that, but I don't want to be my PI, my principal investigator, my boss. I don't want to be like them. That is just too much like hard work. And so what I would encourage you to do is, if you're feeling sort of weighed down by this sense of failure, is to think, actually, what are my options? So I can be an academic. What does that entail? Positives, negatives. I could go into, I don't know, medical publishing. What does that entail? I could go into patent attorney. What does that entail? Positives and negatives. Really review your options. And actually, I think if in uncovering other career paths and really digging down into them, so this is not a light, oh, I could be that, shut that box, is actually no, drill down into it. In uncovering those, I think then you might actually think, yeah, actually, there are a lot more opportunities in this direction than, you know, that pull of academia. And I think if you've chosen to be a research scientist, it is more of a vocation. So there is that pull. Absolutely acknowledge that. But I think if you drill down and you talk to people who have lived experience of working in other careers, you're going to find out that they enjoy what they do. They provide value. They probably have more autonomy than you think they might. That, you know, kind of they're paid reasonably well. So have a look at those alternative careers. I think some of the sense of failure is also because we can't see with optimistic eyes what might happen next. And certainly when I was making that decision to stop with my postdoc, I wasn't sure what I was going to do next, which did, you know, kind of that didn't help with the feeling unsettled. but I just knew that something had to change. And that sense of needing to change was more momentous than the sense of failure holding me back. And I think most people reach that tipping point. The trouble is that if you reach that tipping point too late, I think people can get very upset. And also, you're not using perhaps your contract time to find that next position. So I would, I always encourage people to have a look at the other options, even if they've come to me to apply for a fellowship or whatever it might be. Because if we've got those other options, then we can weigh up our potential opportunities in the future in a realistic way. If we're just going fellowship or not, that really isn't an option. That's a route, that's a yes, no, as opposed to having lots of doors open. This was taken from a document from the University of Oxford a couple of years ago, just pre-pandemic, I think. And they really dug down into this sense of failure and what it meant for academics. So they got a bunch of people together at the University of Oxford to really talk about this in quite an honest and open way. And it makes really good reading, which I will put in the show notes. But I just wanted to take this time to think about this. So finding something new will take time, energy, and imagination. Researching the options for your life is the most profound kind of research you'll ever do. If you've got no energy for anything new, that's a problem in and of itself. So one of the reasons that I encourage people to go and look for things early on, so they've got those options, so they know what's out there, is that some of the postdocs I work with run out of steam. They run out of energy towards the end of their postdoc. The system has kind of won to some extent. They haven't got the time, the energy, and the imagination to investigate their next step. And that then leads to panic. And it might lead to taking on a quick 3-month postdoc or another little piece of soft money, extension money, and then they'll be in the same position in 3 months' time. And that is a dangerous position to be in, which is why I encourage people to look at their options when they have the energy. And quite often that is earlier in the contract than later in the contract, because as soon as we start to feel pressure to get that next post, there is a palpable sense of panic that might be compounded with a sense of failure, of not perhaps succeeding in the role that we thought we might. And then it's like, oh, okay, right, where am I going to go? I don't know what, and people who are in that sort of a lack of energy, lack of motivation, it is really hard to be future looking in that mindset. Absolutely. So I encourage people early doors to look at those and to think about what their options are. It might be you're absolutely focused on academic career, and that's fine, but you would be silly not to look at the other options, just because partly that's how the numbers work, but also you might be missing out on your ideal job. And I think this is something that we never think. I think I'm so passionate about, I wanted to be a physicist. That was what I wanted to be. I never looked at the other things that I could have done. And I love what I do now. But it wasn't on the radar when I was a postdoc. I'd never really thought about what I do now as a proper job. But I love what I do now. And that is much more than I ever did being a postdoc, if I'm brutally honest. So make sure that you swap before you run out of energy. If any of this has really resonated with you, rung some bells, and you want to explore your career options, I'm here for you. Use the links, book in with me. We can explore your career options no matter where you are. So if you're very early in postdoc, brilliant, we can explore that. If you are struggling towards the end of your contract with what to do next, again, we can explore that. I'd be very happy to chat with you. Thank you for joining me today, or if you've been watching on the catch up, I hope you have a splendid week ahead, and make sure it's got plenty of coffee in, and I hope to hear from you soon. Thank you.